Are you one of those people who hate speaking in front of audiences? Would you like to enhance your communication and leadership skills? Then consider joining the Wrightwood-Ashburn Overcomers Toastmasters Club. Our club will help you conquer your fear of public speaking and teach you how to deliver messages that will win others over. Many times our jobs require us to speak in front of audiences to give PowerPoint presentations. If that's you, we invite you to join us, the Wrightwood-Ashburn Overcomers Toastmasters Club, every second and fourth Saturday between 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Come join us online at wao.toastmasterclubs.org. Then check out upcoming WAO events.
This is Mandy Shaw. On the eve of Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, we are honored to have combat veteran and church leader Greg Robinson with us. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Miss Mandy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so grateful that you're here today. I want to start by defining what gratitude is for our listeners. To me, it's a sentiment of feeling content and count your blessings, because life is indeed imperfect and there are things we like and we don't like. And gratitude is not only an attitude, but it's also the action of not being beat down. That's my take on gratitude. What about yours?
Well, my attitude toward gratitude is pretty much the same. I believe it is just being grateful for the opportunities that you have been granted throughout your life and hopefully taking advantage of those opportunities, because it's all one big learning experience.
I love what you said. The first time that we met, I also met your lovely wife of 32 years. Can you talk a little bit about how you met and what do you feel grateful about your marriage?
So I met my wife in 1991. I was in between combat deployments. I had just finished my first two. I was what the military calls a dear job. My first wife had left me. And I don't mean that to sound morbid, it's just the truth. So a bunch of friends of mine got together the very day that we got back. They invited me to a get-together. And at that get-together, this cute girl was there visiting one of her girlfriends who was married to someone who worked for me. So me being 5'6", 5'7" on a good day, 152 pounds, in my mind's eye, I was 6'4", 250. So I decided I was going to make a move, and so I tried to kiss her. And she looked at me and she says, "What are you doing, black man?" And so I was kind of taken aback, and I giggled, and I said, "I'm trying to kiss you. What do you think I'm trying to do?" And she says, "Well, you're cute, but you're not that cute." So I didn't miss a beat, and I said, "But you said that I'm cute, so that means that I have a chance, right?" So she kind of laughed. So I knew then that I had the hook. Okay, that was 1991. So I had just came back from my first tour in Liberia during the Civil War on the west coast of Africa, and my second tour during the invasion of Kuwait during the first Gulf War.
Wow, you have to tell us more about that. But going back to the relationship between you and your wife, now you met and
then after our initial friendship, we started dating very briefly. And I had immediately gotten orders to go back overseas after 2 weeks of being home in the States. So when I got ready to leave, she promised me that she would write and send packages. And this was during the days of what we now call snail mail, because there was no email. It was all letters and packages. And so she was faithful and she wrote. And she kept me going while I was overseas. And then when I got ready to return home in December of that year, she invited me to meet her family for Christmas. So I came to Chicago from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I met her family for the first time.
32 years now, you've stayed together and through thick and thin.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
do you sustain your gratitude for your relationship and your wife
I sustain my attitude of gratitude because, and it's going to sound cliche, but it's just the truth. I have a genuine, solid love for my wife that I think is even greater today than it was way back when we first met. Because, you know, your love as a couple, when you're serious, it develops over time. It went from being the oohs and the ahs, you know, how we first meet, and the lust, and she's cute, and she's this, and she's that, and she thinks this is
Yes.
me, to now you get into the realness of the relationship, of waking up, you know, with no makeup, me waking up, I haven't brushed my teeth. I'm just being honest and trying to, you know, make levity of it because it's the truth. And then you
It's
go
true,
from,
yes.
and then you go from, you know, now you're working, you don't have the time to spend like you wanted to with one another. Now you have children, and now that takes away from your own personal relationship with one another. Um, and then plus me being a combat veteran, she had to deal with that. And then the realness of that. And so what I guess really have a respect for with my wife is the fact that I call it stick to itiveness. And what I mean by that is most couples nowadays do not have the fortitude or even want to put in the work to sustain their relationship. So now, you know, we fast forward, like you said, you know, it's been 32 years now. I am way past 152, 56 pounds. She is no
Well,
longer,
you look fantastic.
well, thank you. But you know, we're talking about gratitude and the realness of relationships. And I guess one of the things that I learned early on that I was taught is that your wife is the apple of your eye. And as you age and you move on in your relationship, sometimes that stem on the apple might be a little crooked. There might be a few brown spots here and there. There might be some things that aren't quite right with it, but that's the apple that you picked. And it is your job to nourish that piece of fruit because it's yours, not looking in somebody else's grove, for lack of better word.
How
And you,
interesting.
and you
Now
know,
I know my costume for the next Halloween, an apple. Thank you for that. You were a combat veteran and your wife had to deal with that, your words. Was there a time during your service that was difficult? And how, if so, how did you renew your attitude of gratitude?
my first tour overseas was in Liberia. Like I said, I was in the capital city of Monrovia. We were stationed at the American Embassy compound there in the city. And we flew in via helicopters. It was my platoon and I, because I was a Navy hospital corpsman, which is equivalent to a paramedic. That's what I did in the military. And as we were flying in, they had the combat engineers with large industrial bulldozers, and they were moving timber on the beachhead. And as I got closer, it looked to have the consistency of what I call Raggedy Ann dolls. So I'm speaking to my age because kids don't know what Raggedy Ann dolls are today. And as we got closer to the beachhead, we realized that these were actual bodies of people who didn't survive the ordeal. And they were burying these bodies as close to the cliff face as they could to prevent the high tide from washing them back out to sea, because they had ran out of space in the cemeteries and such, and to bury people. And so they were using hospitals and sometimes businesses as makeshift shelters and first aid clinics for the people. And so here I am, a young man, I'm 23 years old, going on 24. And I'm seeing all this, and you got this going through your mind. But I was blessed in the fact that because of my wife's letters and her packages, that kept me grounded. But that gave me joy and peace of mind, knowing that I had this wonderful woman waiting for me back home in the States. And then the friendships that I had made with the Marines and other sailors around me we supported one another, and we jokingly would say how, yeah, I might be a good old boy from down south, and I'm a, young black kid from New York, completely opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's our commonality and our camaraderie and looking out for one another and supporting each other in our endeavors that kept us together as friendships. So then that way, once this is all done, we can go back to home to our dysfunctional families, but our camaraderie and our friendships don't change.
I love what you said. Love and camaraderie are certainly such powerful force to keep us grounded and keep us together. Thank you so much for your service. I also come from a military family.
Oh, wow.
My grandfather, like you, was a combat veteran. He later became a refugee. He had to flee his country. I have a lot of respect for men, women, and people who protect all of us so we can have the life that we have. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You're in ministry,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
your life seems to be about service. Can you talk about that?
So here I am, a veteran with PTSD. I have my own issues. I was in the middle of telling a dirty joke on the job, because that's what I used to do. I used to keep people laughing. That's how I cope with my PTSD and some other things, through laughter. She invited me to church, and I got irritated. And she said, well, you promised. So I purposed in my mind that I was going to go to church to fulfill my obligation to her, because I'd given my word, and to never go back. And of course, I was having issues, so I went to the church. I got what we call convicted. I ended up bringing my wife on the third visit to the church. She had never been there before. And the pastor made what we call an altar call. So I went up to the altar, and then he made a secondary altar call, and my wife came up and stood beside me and had never been there. And we gave our lives to God on the same day together. That was June 15th of 2002. And so after I got home that evening, I had some discussions with God, as we call prayer. And I asked God to teach me how to be a proper husband, a proper father, and a better man in accordance with his will and his design. Not my will, but his will. And that is what helped me with my own mental issue, is that God came in and did a work on the inside of me, and I humbled myself and listened to instruction and followed the instruction, and then I applied it to my life. And so then I have the ability now to be able to talk about my experiences freely. So that's what I'm grateful for, and that's how that got me into the position to where I can now serve others, because I can speak about my issues frankly, because other people are going through some of the same things. Some things I could teach them about that I don't do anymore.
That's an incredible testimony, Greg. Thank you. I know PTSD is trauma, and a lot of times undealt trauma in the past. You mentioned praying to God for strength.
Yes, ma'am.
And how do prayers foster gratitude? Is it an instant process, Greg, or it's a continual process?
It's both. It can start off as instant, like it did for me, because I knew for a fact, based upon my background and my upbringing, that there are a lot of things that I got wrong, but I didn't understand that I was doing them wrong. So an example is, I was married once before, as I shared earlier. I was not the best husband, nor was I the best father. My mother was a functional alcoholic, so she was not around a lot. My father was a combat veteran too, but he was off on his own things, dealing with his own issues. So I was raised by my grandmother. At the age of 8, I was given over to her. And I lived with my girlfriend until I was 16. So anyway, my point being is I did not have great role models as far as male figures or father figure or understanding what a family unit was. So what I did was I hodgepodged for lack of better words, what I had seen through my friends and their experiences in their homes, what I had seen on TV, like example, the Cosbys and the Huxtables. So you put all that together in your head because you don't have any proper examples, and you use that as your basis to start a family, to be a husband, and to be a father. And a lot of those concepts were completely wrong. So it wasn't until I had gotten saved and got involved in the church, as you heard me mention earlier, that I went and I prayed, had discussion with God to teach me how to be a proper husband and a father. And so now I have two beautiful daughters. One is married with her own husband now. The other is in her second year of college on a full academic scholarship. And I was able to guide my children through the foundation that God had given me. And the same with my marriage. Hopefully I answered your question.
I love every word that you said. You are a great dad. Sometimes I think it's not where we start, but it's where we end up, because life is not linear. You've been through so much, Greg, and yet here you're today making an impact. I'm going to go off topic a little bit because I feel that people should hear this. When you and I met, you told me that your ultimate goal is to design and provide mentoring to young men in line with your life of service and gratitude. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? Why do young men need mentoring?
Well, young men, they need mentoring because they need positive male, and particularly black first and then brown men secondarily, role models. Because there is so much negativity that is put forward with the media, through the news outlets, through the images that we see day to day on TV, especially living in a metropolitan area like Chicago. And everything is focused around these negative images. But there is so much more to black men than just that. The Department of Labor says 66% of the people that are on welfare are Caucasian. 33% are black or African American, and then everybody else falls below those lines. But when you see imagery on television and in newspapers and whatever media outlets you see, it's always typically a black female and then a black male who is on the system, but the numbers and statistics and the facts don't lie. So it's a systemic situation just to keep down, especially young black men. And so the foundation that I use, I know we talked about this earlier, is based upon godly principles. And what I would like to do is to develop a peer-to-peer mentorship program. Anybody is able to learn or to participate. And then the rules that I have set aside for the program is when you meet with me or you start in the program, there is no vulgar language allowed. We address each other by sir. It's all about respecting one another. So we have our own rules set aside. And I pair up individuals to be with each other so that when they discuss the things and topics that are learned, it's coming from a perspective of what they have learned in the classroom or the situation with me. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think so. You start by setting boundaries, and then you instill in them your word godly principles, and then you create a community so they can learn from each other. So that makes sense. Throughout our time today, you talked about how at some of your most difficult moment, you remained grateful. You counted your blessings. How do young men practice those techniques, and how would that help them?
Well, they would practice those techniques by actually sitting and taking a hard look at themselves. I know that we talked about this earlier too, outside of this podcast. And I explained the principles to you very briefly. And the first one is to be flawed, because it's based off the acronym FATHER. So there's being flawed, there's being faithful, there's being accountable, there's being authoritative, It's being tenacious, being trustworthy, being honest, being humble, being earnest and executed, being respectful, and a rewarder. And then that's broken down into 3 tiers. There's the first 4, the second 4, and the third 4. So, beginning for a young man to be grateful is first to be flawed, understanding that he has issues, and then seeking help for those issues, whether it be through resources, through teachers, through seeking out other preferably black male role models, talking about those things, being grateful for the family unit that he has. In that context of him being grateful for his mother, usually what you have is the mother who's working 1, 2, sometimes 3 jobs to provide for the family. Then on top of her working, she is trying to guide that son, or we're talking about men, in proper behavior and how to conduct himself, and then trying to give him guidelines on how he should live his life and hopefully be respectful. But when you have a parent who is working so much that they can only spend X amount of time with their children, on top of trying to provide groceries in the household, trying to pay the rent, trying to keep structure, trying to keep their children in school, provide clothing and all those necessities that they need, sometimes that takes away from what they can actually give to the child personally. So then now you're relying upon the education system or the teachers to help you provide some structure.
I wonder if we simply say, let's say to your wife, to your daughters, or to the people that we work with, if we simply say, I appreciate you, or I thank you, I wonder if the simple act of saying those 2 words, thank you, can actually help us too. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right, Miss Mandy, because I say thank you all the time, and I genuinely mean it. It really extends out to just being kind one to another. Kindness never hurt anyone, and I think simple common courtesy goes a long way. And one of the things that I taught my children when they were growing up is I said, whenever you encounter a person and they're in a bad mood or they seem angry, because you can kind of read people, I says, think about what that person may or may not have been going through 5 minutes before they met you. So don't react to that person in accordance with how they are treating you. You be the bigger person, step back, evaluate the situation, and there's a scripture that says that a soft answer turneth away wrath.
As a wife, as a mother, nothing works better than when my husband say, I appreciate you, thank you. I'm happy to make him a sandwich or making coffee because I feel that he sees me. So thank you for validating my thoughts on that. Hey, as you know, Thanksgiving is around the corner. My first Thanksgiving in the United States, I'm a first-generation immigrant. I spent with an African-American family. My brother and I were invited, and it was my first time having turkey. I fell in love with sweet potato pie. What do you eat? Do you serve sweet potato pies too?
My wife grew into a good cook over the years. So my wife makes a dish that was passed down to her from her aunt we call it Aunt Lou's noodle salad. And it's basically like egg, macaroni, celery, mayo. I'm trying to think of the ingredients. And everybody absolutely loves it. She makes this awesome banana pudding. We'll just have a good time, a nice time of simple fellowship.
That sounds fantastic. Then this Thanksgiving, who and what do you want to give thanks to? We have today's platform to do that.
Oh, wow. Well, of course, I want to give thanks to you all as Toastmasters. My wife and I were actually talking about this when we met at the library afterwards, and how inviting everybody was and how inclusive everyone was. And you could tell that there was a genuine friendship amongst the members, even though there was all these different personality types, Secondly, I'm grateful for the love of my life, which is which is my nickname for my wife. She's even in my phone that way. She's love it when she calls. She takes this love of my life, and to her, I'm sharing a little bit. I'm her honey pie, and she asked me one day, and she says, "Honey, if something would ever happen to me, would you ever remarry?"
That's a loaded question, Greg.
I know, but I got to share it because I think it's funny. Initially, it was no, and I know for a fact that I would be the old man if someone else came into my life like, don't move this, don't move that. That's from 1991. That's from 2002. That's from 2013. We did this on this year, and I know that would be me. So for another woman to come into my life, I'd have to have at least a 4-year break to try to kind of get over the love of my life. Well, I figured it would go without saying. Of course, I'm thankful to God for all that He's done for me over the years, and all that He continues to do, and all that He's going to do for me in the future, because I know for a fact that there are great things on the horizon, or there are things that are great to me, that I'm going to be able to do on His behalf. And so in hindsight, looking at myself from how I grew up, the things that I experienced, and then to look at myself now, it's almost surreal. But I am just so grateful.
I love what you said. God, family, and friends are also the 3 things that I am grateful for this Thanksgiving.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, to wrap up, gratitude, as Greg and I both define it, is not just a sentiment, but it's also action. A couple of things we discussed about practicing gratitude. Number 1 is count your blessings. And for me, I actually keep a list of gratitude. And for Greg, he is so naturally engaging that he keeps it in his head. So either way works. And next I heard is to stay active. This could be several ways. Greg mentioned about prayers. I also pray a lot. Some people might appreciate the meditation exercise, or some people prefer physical exercise. These are all ways to keep our mind engaged. And we also heard Greg, in fact, expressing his gratitude. So letting people know, that's definitely a way to practice gratitude. And finally, Greg mentioned the times when he was a combat veteran. And the way I interpreted it was that in times of trial, times of challenges or tests, it's okay to say, okay, I'm not feeling well, or this is not feeling right. We don't have to force ourselves to be grateful. We can let us be human first. And as long as we come back to God, family, and friends, we will continue a life of gratitude. Did I capture everything, Greg?
Yes, ma'am, you did, Miss Mandy. That was wonderful. I take it as an honor to be able to be here and to do this with you all.
Yes. And our podcast is actually called We Are Overcomers. WAO.
Yes, I am an overcomer.
Discover, develop, preserve, and grow the workplace relevance of your employees. How? By partnering with Sani Career Growth Incorporated. We are a professional and management development training company that will partner with you to increase the proficiency of your most important asset, your people. We recognize that at the end of the day, it is about increasing productivity and profitability for the sustainability of your business. Therefore, give us a call at 872-871-0055 to schedule a consultation today. That's 872-871-0055. We are Sani Career Growth Incorporated, and we look forward to partnering with you.